I've known Andy for a while. I've just met Dan. The nice thing is we have the broad spectrum of electric vehicles represented here. Automobiles from small, the new Chevy Bolt, all the way up to really big. There's a picture of a Hummer EV on Andy's jacket, and then two-wheelers, electric motorcycles. So kicking off with the theme, and forgive me, I actually made some notes. What is the minimum range for each of your categories of vehicles, and what is the comfortable range where people simply don't worry about range anymore? Andy?
Thanks for the question, John. You right if I go, Dan?
Yeah.
Okay, so I definitely see there's a little bit of a disconnect between what you get out of survey data and then what you see in vehicle sales. So in survey data, it's really easy for customers to check a range number that's larger. And in that vein, in survey data, we start to see that 300 miles is definitely the point where people start to find range as acceptable. And acceptable might actually be a level above minimum. And then 350 seems to be where people start to be comfortable in survey data. And I think there's some sales data that supports that, because if you look at a vehicle like the Chevrolet Equinox EV, it gets 319 miles of range, and it's now the third best-selling EV in North America, right behind the Tesla Model 3 and Y. So we can definitely sell a lot of EVs north of 300 miles. But I'd say, we think there's room to succeed at a lower range than that as well. So if you look at the Chevrolet Bolt EV, which we'll be reintroducing next year, that's going to come out with 255 miles of range, and with really significantly improved fast charge performance versus the outgoing model. We think that there's a pretty good market for vehicles in that range as well.
Okay. So that leads me to one follow-on question, and you'll get a version of this as well. Is there a trade-off between price and range? Is there, for instance, a future market segment, not necessarily for your company, but more broadly in the auto industry, for a vehicle that has 200 flat, or maybe 170 miles, if it's cheap enough? And what are those levels?
It's hard to keep extrapolating that number further down. I'll just use the two vehicles I talked about a moment ago. You look at the Chevrolet Equinox EV, that's a $35,000 price point and 319 miles of range. And then you go to the Bolt EV, which is going to be just under 30,000 and 255. So you connect the dots between those two, and you're around $70 to $80 per mile of range in between those 2 points. I don't know how much further down that goes beyond that.
Sounds to me like that would be 200 miles flat at $20,000.
Possible.
Yeah, one day. Okay, so what's the acceptable and minimum range for motorcycles? And I know there's different categories, so maybe you can walk us through those.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely depends, but I think one thing that certainly rhymes between automotive and power sports is there is a bit of a disconnect in, what people may say in a survey or in their idealized state and the type of riding that they're actually doing. And we know from the Motorcycle Industry Council, which has been collecting total ridership data for generations now, but truly decades, the average motorcyclist is only going to be going anywhere between 12 and 1,500 miles a year on their motorcycle of choice, their primary ride. That doesn't mean that we don't want everything. I think there were a couple of hurdles, psychological hurdles that were passed several years ago about, just the basics of being able to go 100 miles, being able to charge in an hour, being able to go 100 miles an hour. Those have long since been cleared, and I think it really depends on the use case. For example, an enduro rider, if they're on the Verge EX, they're really looking for filling out a weekend. Now, for some folks riding super hard enduro, that means, taking 40 minutes on various hyper technical features that have huge deliveries of power in very short bursts, probably a lot of falls, picking up the bike a lot. And if they can do that over the course of a weekend, they may only be covering 70, 80 miles. But it's going to fill, very exhausting days of 6 to 8 hours of heavy-duty riding. So for that case, it's not about the distance so much as the duration.
What's the split in motorcycles at large between what I would sort of broadly bucket as road motorcycles and off-road enduro, those kinds of things?
Well, it's a little opaque, but it is definitely more skewed to on-street, and it also depends on market. Here domestically, you're going to see a little bit more favorable share on the off-road market. Internationally, that's far more heavily indexed towards on-road, and you're also going to see a lot more smaller displacement, a lot more lighter duty cycles, and that's where the smaller ranges available in, you only have so much room to pack battery between your legs. The smaller ranges available on a motorcycle relative to an automobile are going to be a lot more attractive to city dwellers, especially if you have a smaller radius of travel.
And John, I would just add that one of the things that we're really trying to do, everyone in the electrification industry, we're trying to make sure customers don't have to make these trade-offs, right? So that's the nature of innovation, is trying to get customers more range for less dollars. We had you out earlier this year to take a look at one of our new chemistries, lithium manganese rich, where we think we can get the cost of the lowest chemistries on the market, but get up to 33% more energy density in a cell.
Yeah. Okay. So same question, but how does it differ? And I'm not sure how applicable this is to motorcycles. You'll have to educate us. Differences between retail sales and fleet markets, because there's clearly been a total cost of ownership advantage to battery electric vehicles in certain commercial segments, delivery vans, things like that. How do those acceptable ranges differ among fleet and retail?
So I'm not a fleet operation expert, but what I've gleaned from talking to fleet owners and customers at events like this is that they're definitely, they're laser focused on total cost of ownership, and they really need a range and charging solution that works with their fleet operation and their fleet experience. So you can have something, it's going to depend on, what's your hub, what's your routes, and how are you going to charge? Are you charging at your hub? Are you charging on your route? Those are going to come up with really different scenarios. A lot of electric delivery vans are driving only between 100 and 200 miles per day. So they actually could afford to have a fairly low range compared to the numbers we were talking about earlier, so long as they have an opportunity to charge centrally overnight. But on the other end of the spectrum, you might think about vehicles, persons in sales who need a vehicle to drive around from site to site. They might want an affordable vehicle like an Equinox, or you've got landscaping operators and people like that who might need a Silverado EV work truck, where they might want more range in order to tow a trailer around town, and then have job site power in order to keep things going.
Definitely, the use cases vary. I think the question was more if you're a fleet manager and you can see that, okay, there is a total cost of ownership argument here for this subset of my vans or my pickups or whatever it may be. Will they make those trade-offs?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. They'll make those trade-offs with a focus on total cost of ownership. If the range is higher or lower, and that meets their lowest total cost of ownership, they'll go there.
Okay.
Yeah, and
is there a fleet market for motorcycles?
Oh, absolutely.
Cops,
I'm glad you asked. If I could hop in on the fleet thing, I can tell you it's not just a trade-off, it's a yes and. It's not an either or, because there are over 200, or maybe even closer to 300 now, police and agencies in the United States alone currently using electric motorcycles as part of their service fleet. And I'll get into why that's so attractive to them in just a moment, but as far as like the value proposition of simply having a lower cost of ownership, it is the easiest sale for an OE in the world to speak with a fleet manager, because when you do the Pepsi challenge of what cost of ownership per unit is, and they extrapolate that into the size of their fleet, it's a simple math problem, and they love it, and they can hear the cash register sounds going off in their head. Additionally to that, motorcycles are not going to be the ideal option for delivery, last mile delivery. Maybe if it was like a tuk-tuk or something along those lines, you'd have a chance. And you're starting to see some pedal assist e-bikes with DHL and whatnot here in the city. But for agencies, specifically in the security and police areas, they absolutely love it, because the advantage is, you either have pursuit or you have patrol. And patrol, it's very difficult to sneak up on nefarious doers of no good when you're riding a two-stroke dirt bike, especially through an urban area where that sound is amplified so much. So It's not just that it is a cost advantage, it is a unique and distinct operational strategic advantage to have electric over an ICE machine.
Okay. Follow on to that, I guess, would be for not sort of municipal fleets writ large, but for police forces in particular, because they have specific needs, and there is an enormous amount of built-in culture and cultural preferences. Were there hurdles to get over to get electric motorcycles into the fleets for general users, as opposed to the person who's charged with reducing the carbon footprint of the city, whose police department it is?
Well, I think that audience is particularly positioned to have a very receptive posture for electric. There are some headwinds, specifically with electric motorcycles, really that boil down to licensure and experience. Now, what we know from the military is those ladies and gentlemen are very good at training. They can drill with the best of them. So that was a pretty easily navigable challenge. Once you establish training and certification protocols, that was no longer an issue. However, there are some architecture challenges. Specifically for the Verge MX, it's born and bred motocross bike, fastest motorcycle in motocross circuit, now racing at Super FIM, 80 horsepower and 250 some odd pounds. It'll get you where you're going at a quickness. Very attractive to the military. But because it's a motocross bike, it's not made with a lot of the things that the military needs. Military needs to go 2-up. They need to ride necessarily, maybe they need to pull an extracted or wounded soldier from a field of duty. They need extra pegs. They need ability for attachment, for storage. All of those things need to be architected, which we've happily done at the behest of various organizations across the globe. I think I lost my train of thought there. So I'm going to go ahead and cut myself off, pass it back.
All right. Now, a question that was not on the email that I sent to both of you, prompted by BJ's comment. Neither of you guys, to the best of my knowledge, sell plug-in hybrids at this moment. So let's talk about range of plug-in hybrids. I will say here for the record, I'm on record as saying that until automakers release data on aggregate plug-in behavior, I don't tend to believe that most people actually plug them in. You can throw rotten fruit at me later, but what is a range that will get people to plug in a plug-in hybrid? And I'm going to start with you.
I mean, I fortunately get to punt this one because the reality is, again, when you have the real estate challenges that are inherent to a motorcycle, you are very limited on the number of drivetrain options you introduce to that platform.
But you know a lot about the EV world because I've talked to you. Do you have thoughts?
Yeah, no, so, I'd like to pivot that then. Instead of talking about what would be the ideal range from a plug-in hybrid system, because realistically, I don't think that that's going to be something commercially available, full stop. In power sports, maybe in side-by-sides, maybe in ATVs, maybe in some of those other larger categories. But I can tell you, right now we have stated goals of getting 200 highway miles out of the same type of super lightweight chassis and super lightweight platforms that we're currently developing. Right now, we just launched our first all-street model, the Verge SM. It's a supermoto. Same performance expectations you would get from a Stark Future, and the WMTC, which is the World Motorcycle Test Cycle, which is wildly redundant, standards for range. It gave it 183 kilometers of all-city range. It's 113 some odd miles, 100 and something, if my math's right, 115, whatever. If you think about living in the city here, 113 miles is a lot of grocery getting. Okay, we want to get that to be 200 miles of highway range, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but there's of course a different relationship with highway range versus in city, particularly with electrics. And I think that would really be not just a good goal for us to achieve that we are tracking towards, but I think it would be a good standard for the industry.
spec sheets probably available afterwards from Mr. Quick
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You guys ended with a 53-mile
That's right.
plug-in hybrid, the Volt,
Yes.
which may have been where I met you.
I think it is. Yep.
Wonderful vehicle, now out of production, mourned by its owners. What is the necessary and what is the comfortable range for a plug-in hybrid that will actually get people, not Volt owners, because they are a very distinct pool compared to regular retail buyers who are now thinking about electric cars? What's the amount of range that's necessary to get the random public to plug them in?
Yeah, when you're looking at a plug-in hybrid from that lens, what you're looking at is somebody who really wants to be driving electric. They've made a choice. They've said, "Hey, I like the smoothness of electric drive. I like reducing my carbon footprint." Whatever your reason is, and so you want that daily experience of driving electric, but you want that comfort of being able to go wherever you want to go, and you want to be able to refuel really quickly. Now, electric vehicles, they meet my needs for that. Okay, I am absolutely fine with my fast charging experience all over the country in a pure electric vehicle. But if you are new to driving electric and you don't have that comfort level, you might want the convenience of filling up with gasoline in a matter of minutes. Or if you're doing extended high load operation, like driving a pickup truck and towing a camper, you really might need a means to refuel quickly. So what I think about is someone who wants to drive every day on electric. Average American, I think 80% of Americans commute less than 40 miles round trip every day. So you're starting to talk around 40 miles. Depends how much more that normal distribution you want to get. And then you got to take into account weather and highway speeds, which are going to take your label range and inch it up from that 40 number. So I don't know the exact number, but I think we're circling around something. If you're looking at that daily driving, daily commute, somewhere between that 40 and 80 mile range is probably where you would get most customers 5 day a week electric driving and switching over to gas for a weekend road trip.
Got it. So you led nicely into charging, talking about your own experience. How does slowly, incrementally improving fast charging change those numbers, if at all? My observation, everybody here has probably plugged in multiple times to our various DC fast charging networks. There's Tesla and then there's all the rest, with varying degrees of happiness about the experience. But gradually the data seems to show the networks are getting better, slowly in terms of reliability. They're certainly becoming more pervasive. My little town in the Hudson Valley now has a Tesla supercharger station and an Electrify America station, very much to my surprise. So as this sort of generally filters into the awareness of people, how does that change what is necessary and comfortable range?
Oh yeah, it really unlocks electric vehicles as a realistic option for many buyers, regardless of what they think their range needs are. You're right on. My lived experience and the data show that the nationwide charging infrastructure is getting better every year. This year there's 65,000 public fast charging stations available to customers. That's 25% more than last year. And rewind to 2 years ago, we did not have interoperability between the Tesla supercharger network and vehicles that are equipped with the CCS combined charging standard. So we have that today. So now electric vehicle owners for most brands can charge at Tesla supercharger stations. They can charge at EVgo, ChargePoint, Iona, all these other CCS stations in a way that's really unlocking a lot of highway miles for these customers.
Does that mean that they'll be comfortable with a lower stated range on the window, or do they want both all at the same time?
I think it's a really natural expectation that people would become comfortable with lower range as they start to see and experience better fast charging in their communities. But we'll have to see how it all plays out.
So I think what you said is they have to have the experience of driving an EV, which their first one may be high range, and then they'll say, okay, I don't actually need 380 miles, I can do with 280.
That's totally logical. The survey data right now tells us that EV owners want more range in their next EV, but I would love to see what you're talking about happen, where maybe it bifurcates. Some people want more, and others are like recognize that their driving needs enable a vehicle with lower range.
You will forgive me the editorial comment that many car dealers have sent many children to very expensive colleges based on non-logical behavior by car buyers.
Yeah.
So Dan, motorcycles. I know almost nothing about motorcycle charging, and I'm betting there's a few people here who know more than me, but not a lot more. How do motorcycles charge? Which standards? What rates? Any fast charging? And what do your buyers want in terms of charging?
Well, I think it's also consistent with what Andy was saying, is that people do want the world, and that's not surprising. I mean, just look at all the products around us. They more than meet our base needs in virtually every single way. And that's awesome. And that's what gets people excited. That's what gets people to fund those private educations for dealerships across the world. And I'm all for that. As far as charging a motorcycle goes, the cool thing is, because it is a smaller platform, you can basically charge it anywhere you can charge your cell phone. And, we actually just developed the world's smallest, lightest 3 kilowatt, which sounds really funny in lights of some of the vehicles here, 3 kilowatt hour charger. But in it itself, it's a remarkable step improvement from what previously had been available.
How big's the back it's charging?
It's if you know like what a Sony PSP is, imagine like 2 or 3 of those on top of each other. It's quite small. It's about a foot long. It weighs under 4 pounds. It fits in your backpack.
No, how big is the motorcycle pack that you're charging?
It's for a 7.2 kilowatt hour battery currently.
Okay, so 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours.
Yes, but it does also have the ability to plug into, here we don't have as many of the bring your own cord type of options that are really more popular elsewhere in the world, but it has the ability to plug into really any level 2 public EV charge system. So it can plug into 240 internationally, 120 here, household outlet, or into the level 2 system abroad. As far as charging goes, I do know a certain rep from a certain electric motorcycle company who actually has a Chevy Silverado EV specifically because it has the 240 charging capability in the bed.
So he charges his motorcycle from the Silverado?
He charges
that's
both
great.
his motorcycles in the bed.
Okay, so I'll tie it all up. I was in Traverse City, Michigan last month. I was driving a Chevy Silverado EV Trail Boss. I was towing my boat. There was a pull-through charger. Our friends at Rivian over here, it was a Rivian charging network charger, which was just recently opened up. So I was able to plug in my truck at 350 kilowatts, which adds 100 miles of range in 10 minutes. And next to me, there was an electric motorcycle plugged into a 350 kilowatt DC fast charger as well. So it was kind of everything right there at one spot. It was fantastic.
Yeah. How fast was that motorcycle actually charging plugged into a 350?
I don't know. The rider was in getting a coffee at Starbucks, so I'm guessing that it charged while he was sipping his latte.
Yeah. Okay. Where will we be 5 years from now, motorcycle-wise? And will we see more electric motorcycles in the U.S.? Will electric motorcycles raise the proportion of two-wheeled vehicles in the U.S. because of the benefits of electric?
Well, I certainly believe so. I would say that, like most things, if you want to see where we're going, it's best to look at where we've been. So I think a couple of safe bets necessarily. Like if I knew exactly what was happening, I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be on a beach somewhere cashing checks. But one thing I'm pretty certain of is that we're going to see an incredible rate of increase or rate of decrease of the cost per kilowatt hour. We've been seeing that happening. It's not going to slow down.
Do you expect it to exceed the historical average of 7 to 8% a year, which is now over almost 40 years worth? If
I believed, so yes, and I also think that it's going to change because we already heard some other, battery composition technology mentioned. I don't know what that opportunity is going to be. If it's going to be, was it the lithium magnesium?
LMR, lithium manganese rich.
Yes, I didn't know if it was going to be that. I don't know if it's going to be solid state. I don't know, but I do believe that we are approaching a bit of a saturation of that, or not a saturation, but a bit of a plateauing of that cost benefit curve, and so it's very likely that we'll be seeing a different type of energy storage. In 5 years, that's a very long time at the rate of technology. But to answer your question, yes, I absolutely believe we're going to see more electric motorcycles and, more importantly, more motorcyclists, because there is not an incumbent gas player in the industry, in the world, who either has not announced or is not currently working on announcing their electric platform. That's all the big Japanese, all the big European. The Chinese manufacturers are head and shoulders above, if you look at NIU and a couple of the players there. So you're going to see a real proliferation of electric options. And what I think you're going to get with that isn't just going to be better technology, but more importantly, I think you're going to find more riders. Right now, motorcycling, if you're not a rider, and by the way, I was not. 8 years ago, I had literally never touched a motorcycle in my life. And as an adult, non-motorcyclist, it is a quantum leap to consider becoming a motorcyclist. That's a very clear understanding of who those people are and why I'm not them. But when you introduce something that does not require the manipulation of a clutch, the toggling through gears, it's laughable how few people in the United States can actually drive a standard transmission. Try to do that with your hands and your feet while fairly exposed on the road. When you eliminate all of those barriers to entry, when you introduce really cool consumer product whiz-bang sex appeal into those products, I believe you are going to attract a new class of rider that would otherwise have never bothered to participate in the industry in the first place.
Interesting. Okay, I never thought of that. Someone once compared the complexity of riding a motorcycle to that of driving a Model T, which I still have not been able to master. But
Yet.
Thank you. Yes, I have an offer. So, Andy, Dan brought up battery technologies. Yeah. I have not seen data on how much of the plateauing that he mentions is due to materials costs, which obviously vary a considerable amount. You're the battery guy on stage. What do you see happening with battery evolution and development? We've already talked about LMR. Obviously, the Bolt is going to use LFP, and you guys will be producing LFP within a couple of years. Where do you see batteries going, and what does that mean about where the vehicles go?
Yeah, I do not see batteries hitting a plateau or a cost floor. I see the line continuing to go down because there's always another innovation to add on top of the last one. And we continue to see that to where a lot of the innovation is happening at different length scales inside the battery pack. You're going from more of a macro view, and then you start getting down to the particle view, and then you start getting down to what's inside the particle, and then you start getting down to what's inside the crystal inside the particle. So you can apply innovation at each of those length scales that helps improve performance and lower cost. So where I see things going are lower cost, better performing batteries and electric vehicles so that they work for more and more people. My parents were plug-in hybrid vehicle drivers for a long time. My parents are in their 70s. They just bought their first electric vehicle, an Equinox EV, and they just did a road trip, Chicago to Arizona and back on their own, drive 4,000 miles in an electric vehicle. And that was something that they didn't have on their radar. They didn't think they would do or could do, and now they've done it. So you're going to have organic growth like that and word of mouth, and then you're just going to have better vehicles available from more and more manufacturers in much better selection.
Fair enough. They're waving a hook over there, so we're going to wind this up. Each of you gets one sentence, and I'm an editor, so I will enforce one sentence. What do you want the audience to know about your specific domains? Dan.
The best way to predict the future is to create it. So go ride electric.
Said like a true startup company. Andy.
We have an electric vehicle for you. Whether it's a Cadillac Escalade IQ or a Chevrolet Equinox EV or the Bolt EV that's coming, we've got one for you.
Said like the employee of a large retail car maker. Thank you very much for tolerating us all. Andy, Dan, thank you.
Yeah,
Give us a
thank you.
hand.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to John and our panelists for a terrific exploration into the future of range and endurance in EVs.